Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is, people. Welcome to Branding for Breweries. I am Tim, the owner of the Brand Weaver and the Brand Weaver. So technically I own myself. It's weird. I've got an ego. We'll let it go. But I'm here trying to provide as much value to you beautiful branding and brewery people out there so you survive, thrive, and grow. And today I am joined by the wonderful Aaron. Now, Aaron is a brewery industry expert, I suppose. Like, from his background, there isn't much that he hasn't done. Okay, so this is why I'm bringing Aaron in, and we're going to be talking about the idea that success leaves clues. In a really challenging environment at the moment where breweries are struggling to stay open and draw people through the door, we're going to be looking at the past, we're going to be looking at the present, and we're going to be looking at the future to see what wonderful tidbits Aaron can provide us with to help you guys continue to grow and do amazing things. So everyone, without further ado, please welcome to the stage, Mr. Aaron Gore.
Hey, everybody. Oh, I can almost hear the applause now. And just a little bit of clarity, Tim. The one thing no one wants me doing is actually brewing the beer. So outside of that, I've done almost everything. But yeah, no one wants me brewing the beer, myself included. It's not good.
You make a valid point. Maybe I should have specified the long list of other things that you do in the brewery industry, which would have taken up the 40 minutes of the chat, and we'd
No,
need
no, no.
another.
I've got enough of an ego. I'm entirely about that. Let's just go ahead and list my accolades from this point forward.
Yes, you've joined us for 40 minutes of praising Aaron, everyone. It's
It's
kind of
finally
like a
dreams do
roast,
come
but
true.
inverted. Aaron, my man, let's just get stuck straight into things because there's going to be a whole load of value that we're going to be pulling out over the next, several minutes and however long it takes. But before we begin, for those who don't know you, obviously I've got quite a heavy UK audience here as well. You've had a really interesting route into what you were doing, and we were talking offline that it's not just the brewery industry you've been involved in. Of course, there is an aspect of wrestling, such names as The Rock that you've kind of featured in films with. So I want to know, dude, like, talk us through your journey up to the point of where you are now, and just sprinkle in some wrestling-based magic.
Oh, wrestling based magic. It's all magic in wrestling, but no, that's 100% true. So I got my start straight out of high school in, of all things, professional wrestling. I had no idea what I wanted to do as far as a professional career was concerned. Played in IT a little bit, did some sales, but my passion, the thing I always wanted to do was get into my underwear and pretend to get my ass kicked in front of 150 people at a VFW hall. And that was something that I wound up actually following through on. Did that for a few years in the American Southeast, and then a few more up in New England, so in the American Northeast, and had a great time at it. And it's a surprise to a lot of people that in high school I was actually the quiet, very demure, very mindful type. Didn't talk to many people, very reserved, but uh, something about wrestling, and it might be the spectacle, or the fact that, again, you're in your skivvies in front of a large group of people play acting at being in a fight. You come out of your shell pretty quick. And I realized that I actually had a talent for running my mouth, and something that's pretty much gotten me everywhere to this day. So I did that for years until I had to make a decision of what was going to take up my nights and weekends. And the only thing in the world that pays worse than beer is wrestling. So it became a pretty easy choice after that.
Love it, dude. And so, okay, you decided on beer, which could have been a massive loss for everyone. Like, it would have been cool to see that beautiful beard, sharing the ring with some of the greats. But we're going to talk about beer today. We're not going to talk about wrestling. And obviously, you've been in the industry for quite some time. So to start this conversation off, let's have a look at, look down the past and go, what would you highlight as maybe some patterns that we've seen happen before that kind of are connected with successful breweries? And what can our audience and listeners go, oh, okay, yeah, I see those guys have done it and they're still around, so we should probably try and emulate that.
Yeah, it's funny because anytime I get asked questions like this, I feel like people are looking for some sort of magic bullet or some sort of, deep dark secret that they just haven't glommed onto at any point. It's really not that. This industry is amazing. It really is unique. It's a subculture as much as it is an industry, but it's also unbelievably banal. It's a bunch of small businesses that have relatively high costs, that have an inverted cash cycle, loads of debt, that have a hospitality component. I mean, it's not that dissimilar from a restaurant or a bar or a dry cleaner or a convenience store. And usually the breweries that are the most successful are doing exactly the same things that make those kind of businesses successful. So it's blocking and tackling more than it is anything else. Or I don't know what's the UK equivalent, slide tackling and penalty kicking. I don't know. I'm terrible with football terms.
Dude, I'm the worst at sports, so any of those terminologies went straight over my head. I went, yep, just
That's
smile.
great. As far as we're concerned, we know exactly what we're talking about. But no, it really comes down to the fundamentals, and it comes down to the basics. It comes down to managing your cash flow. It comes down to understanding how to differentiate yourself in a crowded market. It comes down to managing your debt. That's a huge problem in this industry for a lot of reasons that we can get into. But it really comes down to just having an idea of what you want to accomplish, how you want to position yourself, but most importantly, treating this like a business. Because at the end of the day, you can make great beer and be a home brewer. You get into this industry to sell great beer, and that's a very different discipline.
And so is that the big separator you see, that you've got the home brewers, but the ones that have succeeded, they've gone from home brewing, it's got a bit big, it's got out of control, but there's been this mental switch from hobby into business now. And so now it's business mode and I have to learn everything else around it.
That's 100% what it is. Everybody who gets into this industry, because we could all be making a lot more money doing almost anything else other than wrestling, apparently. We get into this because we're passionate about beer and we're passionate about people, and that's something I come back to time and time again. Especially as someone who also has breweries as my customers, you connect with people in this industry by remembering why they're in it. They're in it for beer and for people. That's the core of it. But the problem is the beer is a very small part of running this entire business. You are running a manufacturing company that's welded to a hospitality company in most cases, that's welded to a logistics company, it's welded to a marketing agency. You have to manage all of these all at the same time. That's a lot of hats to have to wear. So the ones who realize that and put their focus on finance, they put their focus on marketing and branding, they put their focus on sales and hospitality, and realize that good beer is the cost of entry now. It is not a way to differentiate yourself anymore. Those are the ones who are going to be the most successful, because that's exactly what this is. It's a business. Once I was consulting for a brewery, sat down with the owner. I spent 6 years as a full-time consultant. I've worked in a variety of roles, still doing consulting on the side. Uh, Brewery owner who I was talking to, he had his computer in front of him, and as we were talking, he said, I got into this just really wanting to, I'm big into fruited sours, hazy IPAs, wanted to brew those, wanted to be able to share them with people, get in front of them, sit across a bar from them, watch their face as they enjoyed what I made. And instead, and he turned his laptop around, he said, I'm booking fucking yoga. And that's what this industry is. And the ones who realize that, make their peace with it, and try to do that part as well as possible are the ones who really stand the best chance of succeeding in an industry where I have a West Coast IPA is not enough to set you apart from all the other businesses in your area anymore.
See, I can imagine there are going to be brewers who are going to listen to this or watch this back and be like, dude, I don't want to hear, like, I don't want that. That's not what I got in this for. Like, I'm struggling to manage my time at the moment, but they don't have to do it alone, right? You're not suggesting that you as the solo brewer has to do all of this. You've got to be able to lean on the skills and talents of others, right?
Absolutely. There's a lot of folks out there who have expertise. It's one of the adages I really love is, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. If I have people who are working for me who are not smarter than me, at least on the subject of expertise and specialty that they have, then I've hired the wrong people. I want to work with people who have these areas of expertise so that I can keep my reins on this larger, more general business, because there's so many things that as an owner only you can do, but humans don't scale, and there's only so much expertise any human's able to accrue. So being able to work with people like yourself, Tim, on the branding and marketing side, being able to leverage tools. The company I work for, we make software tools to help manage backhouse. So brewery operations, production, sales, inventory management. There's point of sale systems that do the exact opposite on the front house side. Their goal isn't to make your life more complicated. It's the exact opposite. It's to be tools that allow for a level of automation, accuracy, insight into your own business so that you can get back to the parts that only you can do. It's just important to realize that making beer, I've almost never seen a brewery owner who's owned a brewery for longer than like a year and hasn't at least considered hiring someone to brew the beer, because that's the part you can find passionate, excited, energetic people to do. What they're not going to do is your books. What they're not going to do is figure out how your company should be positioned. What they're not going to do is figure out exactly how you should be allocating the scant resources that you have as a small business. They're not going to be managing your cash flow. They're not going to be the ones trying to collateralize your inventory so that you have a steady line of credit. These are things that only you can do as a business owner, and you need to hire people or find tools or a combination thereof to help you with the other aspects. That way you do have the bandwidth and you do have the ability to do everything else. And it's doable.
We were talking, well, I asked you about patterns when we started this, and from who you've worked with and what you've seen in the industry, is there that almost that tipping point where you go, that's where you got to start reaching out? Like, that's the point. Because I want people listening going, oh, okay, this is on the horizon. Maybe I'm managing it. Maybe I'm juggling it okay right now. But there's got to be this point where they're like, okay, no, now I need to reach out. Now I need to invest in the business.
I think everybody should be investing in their business, honestly, and it's better to do it early enough to get ahead of these things than to do it later. But the real point is more owners of any sort of business, whether that's a brewery or it's a bowling alley, really should be focusing on priorities. There's always going to be stuff in your business, more stuff in your business that needs done than you're going to have time, bandwidth, and frankly, the spoons, the energy to be able to do. So sit down and make yourself a list of priorities. One of the things I use is Asana. It's a project management tool. I don't even use it for project management. We actually use Monday.com for project management. What I use Asana for is just a prioritized to-do list. And every day, that's the first 10 minutes of my day, is I sit down, I reorder those priorities, and I take a look at, yes, here's all the things that I should be doing. Here's all the things that I need to do. And here's the amount of time and energy that I have to commit to these today. What has to get done? What is urgent versus what's important? What is urgent and important? Prioritize those things and sit down and focus on them. And when you realize the list is growing faster than your ability to work it down, that's when you need help, because that list is only going to continue to grow. And eventually you're going to get to the point where things start falling off aren't going to be unimportant and aren't going to be non-urgent. They're going to be urgent and or important things. And that's too late to get help. That's too late to find tools. That's too late to try and find alternative paths to success.
So I was going to ask about like some of the biggest mistakes that you see breweries and brewery owners making, but is it a combination of just lack of prioritization and lack of awareness for the business and the brand, or is there more to it?
That is definitely kind of the core. I think one of the biggest issues the industry as a whole has right now, though, is as things have gotten tighter, and in the UK, it was, if anything, a bit of a bellwether, a bit of a canary in the coal mine for the American industry, because y'all started to slow down before ours did. The company Beer 30 that I work for, we do a huge amount of business in Australia. That's actually our second largest market, and a similar thing. It's an industry that is right now in abject decline. Do I think that's going to be a long-term decline? No, but that's a much wider topic. Regardless, for a lot of breweries, as they start seeing the industry contract, they start to get defensive. And that means they start pulling back spending on anything other than the essentials. And what most brewery owners find to be the essentials is basically brewing beer. The problem is, in markets like that, the breweries that survive are going to be the ones that are reinvesting in their business, the ones that are making moves to stay relevant, to stay competitive, and the ones who are willing to risk a little cash now for the ability to have a successful business 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now. So the single biggest mistake I see in the industry is not making a choice at all, not making any decisions or making any progress at all. And in business, if you are not moving forward, you are objectively moving backward. You have to grow your revenue because inflation is going to depreciate your revenue. Your assets are going to depreciate. You have to make more money. You have to grow. And that doesn't mean trying to be the next Brewdog. That doesn't mean trying to be the next Cloudwater. That means trying to be whatever success is defined as for you and your business. You need to understand what that is, create a plan to get there, and rally your people and your resources in order to get there. But turtling and becoming defensive and just hoping that the entire thing just misses you, that is a fast recipe. Actually, we have a term for breweries that do exactly that. It's called former breweries. And that's not something that I want. I want breweries to be successful, but and I don't want them to spend frivolously. I don't want them to take unnecessary risks, but just hoping that the industry will contract around you and you'll be fine is a recipe for being part of that contraction. And I wish more breweries realize that now is the time to almost be counter-cyclical and start making those investments, start making those process improvements, and start figuring out how this is a business, not just a hobby. Because for so long, with the industry rising and growing share, there was enough room for a lot of, frankly, bad businesses, even if they're run by great people or even have great beer. And that's not an indictment. That's not a criticism. It's just a fact. So that doesn't mean you can't create those business fundamentals, figure out your cash flow, reduce down your debt, build a plan for expansion, even if that's literally just selling more across the bar of your one facility. You have to have a plan, and that plan cannot be stagnancy.
So one thing I want to ask you about then is, say you've got a brewer, someone who owns a brewery who's listening to this and go, yeah, okay, maybe I've been guilty of going, I'm just going to wait for a little bit more cash in the bank before I do that next thing. And they've gone, right, okay, we've got the funds, it's a small amount, and we need to invest in the business to try and keep the doors open and keep things going. Where do they need to start looking? How do they prioritize where they're going to be investing those funds? Because someone like me, I could always go, well, it's branding and marketing, because I can fix everything with branding and marketing. But you've got a more holistic approach and awareness of the industry. So I'd like to get your take on it.
Well, I'd love to say it's just invest in brewery management software. So I'm going to get that off because I have absolutely no bias whatsoever in that. But no, what I tell clients, what I've said for years, and even what we tell the people internally, is that make the investments in the areas that are going to have the most likelihood of doing two things. So first, as a business owner, your first abiding priority, period, is stay alive. If the lights aren't on, it doesn't matter what you pay your people. It doesn't matter how good your beer is. If the door is closed, none of that matters anymore. So make the investments that keep you alive. The second thing, you need to understand what you're trying to do, because there's many paths to success, and what success means for your business might be different than someone else's. But you could be focused on just making your tap room as sustainable as possible, increasing your sales across the bar marginally, 10% a year, and maybe squeezing a little extra margin. You could be looking to do multi-tap room expansion, build new facilities, expensive up front, but high return once they're up and running. You could be looking to go into distribution, but whatever you're going to do, you need to fix that goal in your mind. You need to make the moves first and foremost that set you up for success in that goal, and you need to commit to that goal. It's okay to change that commitment as new information comes your way. It's like the John Maynard Keynes quote, as I receive new information, my conclusions change. What do you do, sir? It's okay to amend that as you go, but if the information's the same, commit, move forward, and make sure that you don't get distracted with every little thing coming your way. The last thing is just focus on differentiation. Good beer isn't enough anymore. If I ask you what sets your brewery apart from every other brewery in your area, these days there are other breweries in your area. I don't care where you're at. And your answer is, well, we make the best beer. A, good is subjective, and B, if I go into any small pub in the middle of nowhere in the UK, I guarantee you, in the middle of Sheffield, in our smallest freaking bar, I'm going to be able to find multiple high quality beer options. If the goal was to make it easier to get good beer worldwide almost at this point, then we've done it. We won. We've succeeded, guys. Now we have to figure out how to differentiate ourselves when, if you brew it, they will come as no longer a strategy. We have to figure out how to position ourselves. We have to figure out how to create focus around our brand, around the personality and the expectations of our company. And we have to figure out how to find a niche that isn't oversaturated by being yet another, I don't know, maker of bitter in a town in northern England where every third brewery has 15 different kinds of bitter. Or here in the Charlotte, North Carolina area in America where I live, we have a German style Reinheitsgebot following brewery where all they do is Euro style lagers, and they do that extremely well. They're doing probably about the equivalent of like 35,000 hectoliters in production, all distributed in this one city. Their beer is everywhere. We don't need more German style lager breweries in this city. And it's not because I wouldn't enjoy them. It's because that niche is very well defined and very well taken. So figure out what makes your company different, figure out how to communicate that. And that's really all branding means is it's the personality of your business and how you communicate that so that it's perceived in the way that you would like it to be. That's more important than it's ever been to standing out in a world with 10,000 breweries in the US. I forget what it's up to in the UK. It's like about 2,500 or so?
3,000-ish.
Oh, that's all. It's a good thing the people in the UK don't like beer at all.
Again, it's the argument for being able to separate and stand out, because there are 3,000 other breweries out there who you need to compete from. And coming back to your point about having that story and point of differentiation, and as you say, if you've got a brewery and they're doing the same thing as the other three breweries within a close proximity, having the story is going to help you stand out on a local scale. But again, there is that differentiation between like local consumer and through the tap room, and then also wider trade as well, right? Because that becomes more about availability and awareness. So what things do like brewery owners need to be considering, or bearing in mind when it's like, okay, well, story differentiation in a local market versus availability and awareness in a bigger market?
Yeah, it is a challenge because those are two different stories. One of the things I've said for a long time is that yes, people do value local. They value local a lot less than we think they do. What really makes local breweries so successful in their own markets, or gives them the ability to be so successful in their own backyard versus 3 towns over, is concentration of resources. In your one small town, even if you're a relatively small brewery, you can throw more resources at that market than Brewdog ever will. That's just the nature of it. Heineken's never going to throw quite as many resources at your market as you're able to in your own backyard. So even though they have more resources, in this one tiny postage stamp, you are the proverbial big fish in a small pond, and that's a great thing. That changes dramatically when you start trying to move outside and further away from your area of locality. So it becomes a lot less about being able to tell complex stories, a lot less about being able to tell stories that require a deeper understanding, and a lot more about just catching people's attention. One of my favorite quotes about advertising, it's old advertising exec back in the 50s said, people don't read ads, they read things that interest them, and sometimes those just happen to be ads. That's exactly what you need to do as you start moving beyond your locality, is catch people's attention first, and catch it quick, because you're sitting there next to 250 other items on a shelf at a bottle shop, at a grocery store, wherever people happen to be buying their beer. You're not going to get the opportunity to sit them down and have that one-on-one discussion, have that one-on-one contact point the same way you will across the bar when your staff is fully trained on your product. They're able to dig into what people's needs are, their past experiences. You need something that's going to be extremely self-evident. It's going to be extremely easy to communicate, and is going to say exactly what you need people to understand about your business in as little contact and as little influence as possible. That's as few words as possible. That is packaging art that is as indicative of what you're about on one facing. Key thing, if you have art around the whole damn can, I hate to break it to you, they're only seeing that front facing 99% of the time. So make that where your story is told, have all the information people need to see right there, and support it with point of sale materials to maximize their ability to actually understand what you're about. When I say point of sale materials, anybody who's not from a background doing distribution, that's things like stands, that thing like signs, that's things like shelf talkers. Those are those little wobbly things that hang there and just get annoying as you're trying to go past the shelf. You hit them every time. Use those opportunities. They're small dollar investment, and they can make a huge influence on people's decision making. because we have so many decisions out there, so many options out there on the beer side. For most customers, they're buying based on the label. They're buying based on small cues, buying based on price. They don't have much to go on. They don't have the level of expertise that we do, being in the industry. So one small point of influence can have a massive impact on them choosing you versus what they're seeing as an enormous amount of noise on the shelf that they just don't understand. Help them find clarity.
And I was having this conversation with someone the other day. It's like a lot of brewers and brewery owners, they're brewing and marketing to the 2% versus the 98%, because they're brewing for the people who appreciate the alchemy and the skill that goes into crafting that wonderful beverage. Whereas the other 98% of your potential market, they're a far more simpler creature, I suppose. And it comes back to those things that you talk about, those kind of simple cues, raising awareness, just grabbing the attention by doing something a little bit different and cutting through the noise. So if breweries go, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Like, I've either got to kind of optimize my tap room, or maybe I need to look at increasing my awareness across the trade, or maybe I want to drive like more sales through the website. Like, I want to go direct to consumer. And you talked about finance a little bit earlier on. What's the easiest way and the best way to start, spotting those patterns where they go, I want to, that seems to be my best route to survive and stay open. Like, and how do they optimize on that?
Yeah, that's a hard question, just because there really are a lot of paths to both success and to failure. And I'm not trying to be evasive on the question. It's just the fact of it is.
Give me an answer, Aaron. Come on, straight through.
Exactly. Just going to dance around it for a bit. But, friends and family are a lot of times the most no strings attached way of funding your business. The problem is if you take on later investment, particularly if you take on, for example, here in the U.S., we have Small Business Association, SBA loans. They come with a personal guarantee. What that means is that your own personal assets are held against that debt. So if you wind up defaulting on that debt, they can go after, for example, your house, et cetera. And the big thing I tell people is, if you're not willing to bankrupt your mother-in-law, don't take money from her. If you're going to at any point have a personal guarantee on any loan, and you're probably going to in this industry. So capital, you need capital to get going in this industry. It's one of the biggest challenges. Is it's pretty expensive to start a brewery. Once you're running it, it's not nearly as much, but that upfront capital can be tough. So bootstrap as much as you can. Take advantage of loans when you can, but be sure that you have a good understanding of your cash cycle, because one of the biggest challenges that we have in this industry is I have to lay out cash for my raw materials before I can even start brewing a beer. And let's even say I have 30-day terms on them. So I've got a 30-day buffer. It's 21 days to make an ale. Like, it's a lot longer than that if I'm going to be making a lager. If I'm throwing anything in barrels or making any sort of traditional sour, it's going to be drastically longer. So let's even say we're making an ale. It's 21 days to even get that done and packaged off. Now it goes to my cold box. Now I have to wait for my wholesaler to pick it up if I'm doing distribution. If I'm lucky, that'll be the next week. It might be almost a full month away, but let's even hedge that. Now we're up to 28 days before that product has even reached the wholesaler. Probably going to be a couple of days before it's actually being sold in market. So now we're at that 30 days and I owe out, and I haven't even gotten paid because my wholesaler has 30-day terms with me. So I've got 30 days that I have to wait where I have spent money and I'm not seeing anything back. And that's assuming they took the entire batch, which probably didn't happen. In most cases, it's going to be 120 days before you see your money back in full, and you owe out on it in 30 days. That is a challenge. Now, that's completely workable. It just means that your float, the amount of cash that you actually have to have in reserve, has to be a lot larger than it would be otherwise, which means you need more capital and more cash that's you're sitting in your account doing nothing, that otherwise could be doing a lot of good for your business. So having a good understanding of that cash cycle, a good understanding of your debt service payments, a good understanding of what it takes to even fuel growth. I've seen breweries killed by growing too fast because now they have a grocery store account, like a Tesco account. And, that's a lot of volume that they have to fill up. and they literally aren't getting their cash back quick enough to fuel that growth. They fall behind on payments. They can't pay for more raw materials. They run out of credit with their malt suppliers and their hop suppliers, and now the bottom falls out of the entire business. So very simple understanding of your own cash situation, your own debt situation, your own finances. That's going to be more good than anything that I can do for you, anything that Tim can do for you as an accounting 101 class. After that, hire us or pay for our services. But basic accounting, basic finance is the foundation of running any sort of small cash heavy business like this.
So you're saying about those who grow too quickly, and I wanted to talk about, what. Let's put the finance to one side for a minute because we've just ticked a box on that. But what are the other successful traits, for those breweries who do scale and do get bigger? But also, is that the end goal? Is that the driving goal? Are there benefits to actually staying that little bit smaller? And is that easier to manage and operate? And brewers can still enjoy and probably live a slightly more stress-free life than if they went big dogs.
Yeah, the world of growing fast is very high risk, high reward. If you reach a certain scale, beer is a very, very scalable good. It takes a while to get there. You really have to get to like the 20 hectoliter range before you start seeing real returns to scale. But once you get there, your margins do expand, and they expand quite a bit. That gives you a lot more freedom, a lot more options, and typically your brand recognition as well goes up. So you have a lot more flexibility with customers. You're having to pay for consumer education, top of mind, a lot less. That's valuable. It's very, very hard. There's something called a power distribution, and some markets fall under a power distribution, some fall under a normal distribution. Normal distribution would be where most companies are about a mid-size, and then you have a handful that are doing volume at a very, very big size, but usually very, very few, and then you have very few who are doing it at a very, very tiny niche artisan size. Beer is a power distribution. That means that the vast majority of our volume is produced by the largest firms, and then we have this long, long tail of tiny, tiny firms that are probably never going to be able to scale out of that stage. And that seems like it's creating almost a default fail state for breweries, but that's not it at all. Because to your point, there are advantages to staying small. So you can be a lot more nimble than you can be at a large level. It's one of the reasons why I think our industry needs small breweries, because those are the innovation drivers. And not just our industry, but any industry needs small business. They're the ones who push innovation forward because they're able to iterate so much quicker than these large behemoths that are these multinational conglomerates. But you're also able to capture a lot more margin across the bar if you're focusing on your taproom or your tasting room. So even though you are a much smaller organization, Heineken, Carlsberg, Budweiser, they're making pennies on the dollar relative to what you're able to make across your own bar that you own, where you're the one who's selling directly to the customers. And that doesn't make it easy. You got high overhead, but it does give you some pretty solid, reliable earning potential once it is up and running successfully. It also lets you really leverage that local power. You can stay small and just focus on your own backyard and completely dominate that backyard. That brewery I referenced here in the Charlotte area, that again, we're talking 30,000 hectoliters plus, that they're doing all in one city on a very limited range of styles. With now, I think they were about to open their third tasting room. These tasting rooms are huge, like Hofbrauhaus style giant beer gardens. And they did that from selling across a sawhorse. They were literally selling bottles across a sawhorse, one bottle at a time when they first got it started. But they found a focus, they found a niche, they found something they could specialize in, and they focused on pouring their cash back into the business and iterating up to a larger and larger scale. You don't have to be selling across the whole country in order to still have a good sized business or a very successful business. And we need small local breweries the same way that we need small local convenience stores, same way we need small local movie theaters, small local anything. That really does. They're gloriously inefficient. They tend to employ more people than larger organizations. They tend to have more of a community impact than larger organizations. They tend to push that innovation forward. And if you're going to go big and your plan is to scale your business, the one big piece of advice I can give is you have to commit. and you have to be ready for that. And you cannot serve two masters. You need to either focus on staying small and leveraging the advantages that come with being able to move quickly and having low risk of failure on any individual's decision. Um, but if you're going to commit to going large, if you're going to commit to large scale distribution, be prepared to go all in on it. Be prepared to pour all of your resources into it, because if you are not willing to commit to it fully, then you will fail at it fully. And that means, that needs to be where both of your eyes are kept. And you're seeing more and more kind of brand in a box where they don't even focus on a tap room. They're not even focusing on doing any more than one or two products. They're focusing on a really tight focus and using that as a scalpel more than a shotgun, trying to penetrate into the market and really grow at scale. And that's the right way to do that.
And I suppose this comes back a little bit to what we were talking about previously, with the idea that you can't do it all on your own. You've got to get the expertise in. You've got to bring those people in who know what they're doing. So if you are bringing in that financial assistance, in that branding and marketing assistance, in that operational assistance, they're going to be your measuring stick for them to go, okay, yeah, we're now in a position, or we can start to take that growth, and this is the path that we need to do, versus, holy crap, where did that come from? Yeah, let's go big, which I assume would be the terrible way to do it, right?
Absolutely. The important thing is, as the owner of the company, and this is whether or not your marketing specialists are internal or someone like yourself who's external. Same thing on your sales consultants. If you're putting more focus on outside sales staff, like your wholesaler, or if you're trying to do it internally, if you're doing self-distribution, for example, you as the owner operator, or you, if you're in a large organization, a CEO, COO, you are the chief priority officer above all else. That is your job. You need to set the strategic goal. You need to allocate the resources. And then you need to trust people to be able to execute against that. But if the goal isn't clear, and if commitment is not there, and if those resources aren't allocated firmly and dedicated to individual tasks at a time, it's very easy for things to get fuzzy. And then you have a whole lot of things that aren't getting done halfway. They're not getting done at all. So it's one of those things, don't half-ass anything, whole-ass a couple of things. That's exactly what you should be doing. And no one can decide what that goal needs to be other than you. But if you're going to be setting that goal, you need to be making it clear to everyone else in the company who works with you. That way they can apply their own expertise to helping make it happen. But when goals aren't clear, people can be doing what they think is the right thing. And they can even be succeeding at some other goal, maybe even a contradictory goal, and crushing it at it. And that might be actually moving you further away from where you want to be. So be clear with your people, set expectations, but also trust them to leverage their expertise for the success of the goals that you're setting. And if you cannot trust them to do that, that's where problems come in, because you're not going to be able to micromanage every element of it. And you're not going to be able to keep your hand on every small element of it either. You have to be willing to trust your people, but you can only trust them if A, they understand what you're being asked to do, and B, you have accountability systems in place to where you can validate that they're doing what they're supposed to do. Trust but verify.
Okay, so let's picture this brewer. They've had a light bulb moment. They're like, oh my God, the past 40 minutes have been incredible. Aaron has convinced me that I'm not going to go alone. I'm going to take the step. I'm going to become a businessman or a businesswoman. I'm not just going to be a brewer, and I'm going to whole ass it. I'm going to go straight in. But, and I know you said there's no silver bullet, there's no fixes, but are there maybe underutilized or elements that might be overlooked that brewers really should have on their list of things to, you want to check that out, you want to consider this if you're going to take that step and go further?
Absolutely. And ironically, they tend to be some of the simplest ones. Again, we as an industry are filled with passionate, brilliant people, a lot of whom came from very different lines of work. They're engineers, they were lawyers, they're IT professionals, but this is a new expertise for them. And a lot of the things that make the biggest impact are very, very simple. Forecasting is a huge one. So actually later today, I'm going to be doing a presentation for craft beer professionals, online community of people across the industry, talking about using project management techniques to launch new products. So instead of just brewing a beer and hoping to God you can sell it, which we do all the time in this industry. Actually trying to treat it like a project, getting feedback from stakeholders, including sales and marketing, so you have an understanding of what's actually got the best chance of succeeding in the market and why. Actually forecasting your sales and seeing if you can get some early purchase orders from your wholesalers and from your tap room, so you have an idea of the kind of volume that you need and the kind of splits you need, what kind of packaging splits that you need. Making sure that you set no earlier than dates so that your sales and marketing team are able to be ready to support those products in the market with a go-to-market strategy that's fully vetted, has collateral, is actually able to get the word out there without you just kind of throwing it at the market and hoping to God that it sticks. These are all very, very small, simple things, but they protect your cash, because inventory is just another word for risk. When you're putting a bunch of beer into kegs, putting a bunch of beer into casks, putting a bunch of beer into cans or bottles, if it's just sitting there, that is just cash that you have parked. And if it codes out, then that is cash that you have lost. So the more you're able to do just very as accurate as can be pre-selling and forecasting, that can have a massive impact on your business. Another chief one is the difference between good brewers and great brewers that I think goes underappreciated. A good brewer can make great beer. A good brewer can make great beer every time. Even a great brewer can make great beer at a lower cost and more consistently. And that is the chief differentiator, because so many people are just trying to maximize that value of our beer is so damn good while they are losing so much money, and they have one or two QA/QC issues that completely break the trust with the customer, because there's so many options out there that customers aren't giving you a second chance. So that focus on consistency alongside quality, and that focus on margins and on being able to actually have something that you can put in the bank from selling your beer, not just being able to show top line revenue. Again, huge impact on your business. It's a focus thing. It's not some simple technique, but it's a very different focus than is often used across the industry, and it's one I'd love to see more breweries take up.
Dude, I preach, ultimately, brother. Because what you're talking about, in many ways, you can go, yeah, so of course you can't brew for yourself. You've got to brew for your consumer, and what do they want to drink? Because naturally more people are going to drink it. You talk about the QA and QC side of things, which is hopefully going to get you that second pint, that I call it. You've had one, you want to have another one. But equally, because it doesn't always happen that way, like you say, there's so many beers on offer, at least you've got a sales and marketing team out there banging the drum and communicating about what's coming out. So they're going to, for whatever drips out, you get this steady funnel coming in of more people who are interested, and it continues to turn the wheels on what is hopefully a really successful business. Oh gosh, it's like a shared mind. It's a hive mind for brewing and attracting people. I love it. I love it.
It's alarming for all of us.
Okay, so we've looked at the past. We've looked at the state of play where we are right now. Now, Aaron, if I can be blunt, let's rub your big shiny crystal balls and look into the future. I can join you, my man. See, it's all good. For anyone who's listening, both Aaron and I are as bold as they come. So, that's why we're talking about shiny balls. Anyway, moving on. The future. What's coming down the track, dude? Help us prepare. What do we know? Impart your wisdom.
Yeah. So right now across the industry, there's a huge amount of doom and gloom. The sky is falling, Chicken Little sort of mentality, and that bothers me for a few reasons. The first is there's almost become an entire industry around exploiting this alarmist instinct in craft beer. There are people whose entire brand is built around telling you all the reasons this industry sucks and is doomed. And I absolutely hate that, because for one, even if that's true, that's completely unproductive and unhelpful. At best, it's catharsis. At worst, it's just fueling a self fulfilling prophecy. But I don't think it's that at all. So again, one of the key themes for a lot of my work over the years, a lot of the speaking engagements I've given over the years, is that beer is special, but beer is also not special. Like, we are not that unique that there's not enormous lessons that we can learn and probably should have already learned from other industries. And at the end of the day, what our industries rise, both its early stages, its current or its recent past, and its current phase, are all indicative of is that this is a normal adoption curve. Now, an adoption curve, I don't want to, go too far down the rabbit hole, but really think of like the letter S. That's why it's called an S curve. It starts out slow and shallow. It climbs very quickly upwards, and then it balances out and maybe even declines slightly. But as a whole, it's more about leveling off or at least slowing down. This is a very common pattern you see for new technologies all the time, and that's really what we were in a practical sense. Is independent beer, craft beer, however you want to refer to it, good beer, was a new technology to the average American or UK consumer. Obviously UK's had great beer for a long time, but things like American style IPAs and kettle sours, the kind of beer that we associate with the movement these days. Those were novel. And so early on, the biggest thing that we had to do was preach to the most dedicated customers who were early adopters by nature. They love trying new stuff. They're really interested at its core in beer for its own sake. The hyper nerds, the geeks, like you and I, and that was a slow going. There was a lot of consumer education. Those early adopters had to come on board, but once they did, there's only a small number of them. But then they start evangelizing, and now it starts becoming a little more salient. It starts getting a little more into the mainstream, and adoption takes off. And now you got more and more people who are like, oh, I got that buddy who's really into beer. He keeps talking about IPAs, and now they're talking about it, and now everybody's going out to breweries, and you see explosive growth. You see us in tech sector all the time. You see us with cars. You see with pretty much anything that hit the scene. This was kind of the way that new technology evolves in the market. But eventually, you reach the point where the people who are interested in it but not obsessed with it start to fade, and it starts becoming more mainstream. You start having to reach people who you mentioned earlier that they're a simpler animal. I wouldn't even say that. They might be as into music or as into, I don't know, Warhammer 40K or as into comic books as we are into beer. It's just they're not that into beer. It's a thing they drink or a place that they go. It's not who they are. And we're never going to make beer who they are, and that's okay. So what we're going to see is that we have to become more comfortable talking to more casual consumers. We're going to have to become more comfortable with us being a part of a mainstream landscape and not this explosively growing, hot niche product that's just talking to people who are already primed to want to try new stuff. And we have to do that because the alternative is we keep talking to that same group of early adopters. The issue is the same things that made them so likely to jump on the craft beer wagon makes them likely to jump on the bourbon bandwagon or the wine bandwagon or any number of other things in their life outside of just beverage, the cannabis bandwagon, maybe the video game bandwagon. And uh, they're not reliable customers because they want to have new experiences. They want to try new stuff. Something I do any conference I give a speech at is say, raise your hand if you drink craft beer. And invariably everybody raises their hand because it's a brewers conference. Second thing I say is keep your hand up if you drink bourbon. Everybody keeps their hand up. And I say, you're the fucking problem because we're the best customers that we have and we're the worst customers that we have because we're already looking at other stuff. And I'm a huge comic book nerd. I mean, I got a Batman tattoo, and if you're listening to this after the fact, right there on my inside arm, comics did faced the exact same thing in the 90s. They became a massive business, started reaching a ton of mainstream salience, and they decided to double down on the diehards. And nowadays, they can't give comics away, even though Marvel movies are the biggest movies out there. None of that's actually having any positive impact for the comics themselves. Wrestling went through a dark age, to really loop it all back after they did the same thing. They tried doubling down instead of leaning into their mainstream appeal after the Attitude Era in the late 90s. And it led to 15 years plus of them kind of wandering in the woods, so to speak. We have to be willing to embrace the fact that we did what we set out to do. We made good beer, diverse beer, easier to get. And now we're just a business. We're just a product, and that's okay. That means we did what we set out to do, but it does mean that we have to change how we're doing it.
I mean, empowering yet stark and depressing at the same time.
That's basically me.
I think it was the LinkedIn bio, if I remember correctly. That's
no, I really do think that craft beer's best days are ahead of it. I do see us returning to growth. I think it'll be a lot more modest growth. I think if you look at us compared to parallel industries like restaurants or bars, we are doing way better than they are. That's not a good thing. I'd love to see them have better growth as well. But it's not doom. The sky's not falling. The bottom hasn't fallen out. If I hear the word bubble one more time, I'm going to lose my damn mind. This was always going to happen. I've been writing about this since 2016 that it was going to happen when America's beer industry was at the peak of its growth. It's a totally normal thing for new tech. And I think the worst case scenario that we're likely to see for beer is that we just kind of stay relatively flat, maybe decline slightly and stay there. I think the more likely answer is once we start getting some of these, I hate to say it this way, some of the firms that are already in place, some of the breweries that are already in place, they're just not made for this environment. And I hate to see them close. Some of them are owned by my friends. I really hate to see them close, but this is how markets evolve. This is how industries evolve, and a level of churn is healthy, even if it's unfortunate. And this isn't unusual. It happens in every industry. It happens in every market. It happens worldwide. This is always happening all around us. There's always a level of improvement, and the ones that can work within this environment do, and the ones who can't adapt and can't grow do not. And I think the sooner we start making our peace with that instead of wringing our hands over it, the sooner we can get back to doing what we all got here to do.
Aaron, my man, that is a beautiful way to bring this conversation to a close. But before we do, if people like the sound of your dulcet tones, if they prefer yours over mine, if they prefer your head, your beard, whatever it is, it's the American version of Tim, and they want more of you in their lives, in their ears, and in their eyeballs, where can they find you, Aaron? Just promote yourself.
Absolutely. You can find me on Facebook, ironically, is usually the best place to find me. I was telling you before we hopped on, I share news from all over the industry on there. It's not even a personal page anymore. It's a news page. So that, Instagram, pretty much all the major social medias, you can find me at Ale Chaser, ALECHASER. Or if you do own a brewery and you'd be interested in talking more about ways to improve your business, please look us up at Beer 30. You can find us online at beer30.com or thefifthingredient.com. But please do reach out, even if it's not about the software that we offer. I always like to meet people from around the industry and help in whatever way that we can, at least direct them towards people who can help. So love to hear from you.
Fantastic, my man. And it's been a really valuable, really broad conversation. I've loved it, bud. So once again, everyone who's tuned in to listen to this live, or indeed listening to it back in whatever guise and shape it is, I appreciate you all. I love you all. I've been Tim the Brand Weaver. This has been Branding for Breweries. I'll see you on the other side, people. Rock on.